Hi there, everyone, and welcome along to VLGA Connect for another week. It's the last Friday of July as we record this, and lots to tell you about in another bumper edition of the show, brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers will be with me very soon for a catch-up. He has news of another interesting councillor conduct decision, the wash-up from the Wyndham mayoral crisis, and where do those proposed changes to the Local Government Act sit in the wake of this week's developments on Spring Street? Also later today, as part of our continuing state election lead-up series, Councillor Rob Amos joins me from Rural Councils Victoria to tell us more about the Alliance's wish list from the major parties and candidates. But first, let's round up this week's main news from across the sector in Connect News. Kingston City Council has unanimously voted to refer invoices from state-appointed municipal monitors John Tanner and John Watson to IBAC and the Local Government Inspectorate after reports of apparent billing irregularities. The discrepancies have also been sent to the Council's Internal Audit and Risk Committee, though 3 councillors reportedly left the online meeting where that motion was passed before the vote occurred. Yarra City Council Mayor Stephen Jolly has appeared in the Melbourne Magistrates Court as a contested hearing continues into an unlawful assault charge from his 2024 election night celebration. Defence lawyers say Councillor Jolly acted in self-defence during a confrontation with masked protesters. A multi-day hearing is set to hear evidence from 14 witnesses. An independent arbiter has found Ballarat City Councillor Damon Saunders engaged in misconduct after disclosing Councillor Tracy Hargrave's mayoral nomination during a live radio interview. The arbiter finding that breached the model code's respect requirements, though the nomination was not confidential. Councillor Saunders is serving a 2-week suspension and must publicly apologise after Councillor Hargrave said attempts to resolve the issue informally failed because he refused to meet. More from Tony Raunic on that in just a few moments. Indigo Shire CEO Trevor Iorino has resigned after almost 9 years in the role, effective in February next year. He says the time is right to step away from full-time executive leadership. Mayor Sophie Price has thanked him for his steady leadership, and the council says the transition will be managed in an orderly way over the coming months. Janet Dorr has been appointed acting CEO of Hepburn Shire Council following an external recruitment process. The appointment will run from the 3rd to the 23rd of August. That comes after current CEO Bradley Thomas recently resigned his position after 7 years at the council. Some service delivery news from a number of councils this week. In Wangaratta, the council has voted to end direct delivery of aged care services after an independent review, with support at home ending by late September and other programs to continue until new providers are appointed. They've cited rising regulatory, clinical and reform pressures for the decision. Greater Bendigo will hand maternal and child health services back to the state by year's end, with a new provider expected before the end of the year, a move the council says will better support complex needs. But nurses warn it could weaken local community connections. And Greater Geelong has voted to shift its 15 libraries into a company limited by guarantee model to meet Local Government Act requirements by July 2031. They'll maintain services via its regional partnership, and they've renewed calls for fairer state funding as councils cover about 80% of library operating costs. Bernalla Council will step up advocacy on large-scale renewable energy developments after strong community feedback, including a 156-signature petition raising concerns about bushfire risks, rural amenity and agricultural land impacts from the proposed Nyoka solar and battery storage project. The council is exploring a regional coalition with neighbouring municipalities to strengthen local representation in state planning and approval processes. And in some news from outside of Victoria worth passing on to you, a unique problem in Lake Macquarie City Council where they say pranksters have been throwing traffic cones into tall pine trees across the city. It's costing them thousands to remove, and City Works manager Barry McDade has warned The stunts are dangerous, with people climbing up to 25 metres high and risking serious injury in doing so. And you probably did not miss the fact that Neil the elephant seal recently visited the coast of Tasmania, and Clarence City Council has revealed the cost of his visit. It spent $31,000 on crowd control and repairs. Here's Neil by the numbers: a 34-night stay in Clarence, with one street sign flattened, 10 bollards knocked over, one section of fence crushed, and 275 and a half staff hours managing traffic and crowds and repairing damage. The Mayor of Clarence, Brendan Blomley, said the measures were necessary to protect public safety and the protected marine mammal. And that's VLGA Connect News for this week. For more on those stories and more, listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast, sponsored by the VLGA and available wherever you listen to podcasts. It's always great to have Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers with us. And this week, there are some things we absolutely must talk about. Hello, Tony. Welcome back.
Hey, Chris. Hey, viewers.
Good to see you. Now, Parliament's back. We couldn't but notice lots of things happening on Spring Street this week. And it begs the question, what does all of this mean for those proposed changes to the Local Government Act that were, I think, originally expected to be debated this week?
Yeah, well, of course, new premier, perhaps some new thoughts about some approaches to legislative change potentially. But one of the first things a new premier often does, Chris, as you'd know, is a reshuffle of
So do you
cabinet
think
appointments.
we're going to have yet another new local government minister this side of November?
Look, it's possible. I must say it's probably not one of those portfolios that has been muted in the media or
Yeah.
talked about in the media as being up for change. But certainly, I think with all the kerfuffle about the change of premier and such, the legislative agenda of the government, I think, has been somewhat put back. Certainly, this Local Government Act, Stronger Communities Bill, as it's called,
Mm,
was listed to be for debate to continue in the Legislative Assembly this week, and that didn't occur, Peter and viewers. And I
mm,
managed to look at the Hansard this morning before we recorded this, and whilst it was on the agenda paper for Thursday the 30th, they didn't get to it, and it's
right.
now next listed to be dealt with on the 11th of August, when the
Mm.
Legislative Assembly reconvenes. So a bit of a delay there, Chris.
And there's
And
not many sitting days left, if I understand that correctly, Tony.
yes, that's right.
Mm,
And particularly that we do know that that there is some different views in the Parliament on this bill. There are proposed amendments that the opposition want to bring, particular controversy around that Fair Jobs Code stuff.
right.
There's an
Mm,
issue about retrospectivity, Chris, and I understand that we're all looking at the Hepburn Shire Council problem, and we've talked
yeah.
about it on this show, and we've thought, this bill's going to solve that problem. Well, the bill's not currently retrospective, so it
Mm,
wouldn't actually solve the issue for the Hepburn Shire councillors unless it was made to be retrospective. And I
yeah.
understand that the government is talking to the Office of Parliamentary Drafting, or whatever they're called, those internal lawyers that draft legislation, about the ability to make it retrospective. I believe that the opposition is seeking to have that impact. But yes, I'm particularly in Hepburn Shire, they're all
Yeah.
sitting around waiting, and anywhere else where this sort of prosecution might arise.
Could potentially happen. Now, we will have Bev MacArthur, the opposition spokesperson on local government, on VLGA Connect in the next week or so. She's booked to come and chat with us, so we'll find out about what they're seeking in terms of that bill. As you mentioned, Tony, there's some other things that people are waiting on there, and one was to give more ability to councils to remove a mayor, and
Mm.
that was widely seen as a response to the Wyndham mayoral crisis. Well, the mayor there at Wyndham, now former Mayor Preet Singh, has basically fallen on his sword and resigned, which removes the need for that to come in quickly. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, yes. And so Wyndham's not the only example of this. It's certainly the
Mm,
most recent. We remember a vote of no confidence in Councillor McClendon at Whittlesea
of course.
some
Yeah.
time ago. But
Mm,
you are right. It resolves that immediate issue of governance at the city of Wyndham. Finally, after 3.5 months, I think this has sort of dragged on.
mm,
Councillor Singh resigned on the 21st of July. Um, Recorded statement posted on social media where he admitted he said he was wrong to provide that character reference that he did to Mr. Patel, who was convicted in relation to grooming and sexually assaulting a 15-year-old girl. He said, none of us gets every decision right. Leadership is also about accepting responsibility when we don't. And he went on to say, I got the decision wrong. I deeply regret it. Um, and have apologized without reservation. And that followed, Chris, like months of pressure, that vote of no confidence, protests, in fact, several protests
yes. Yeah.
from the community, and then a municipal monitor being
And I
appointed to the
noticed,
council.
Tony, in his statement, he didn't go quietly, if I could put it that way. He had a bit of a swipe at others in Parliament who had given character references and not been held to what he felt was the same standard.
Yeah, yeah. So various of in fact, some of the ALP local members, or at least one in that area that of Wyndham, spoke in the Parliament and outside the Parliament, I believe, calling on him to resign and saying, it was a terrible failure to
Mm,
provide this character reference, which removed his right to act as mayor. And so he's pointed out in his resignation speech that there seems to be a bit of a double standard operating here. In fact, one of the members of the Victorian cabinet, Luba Grigorovich, she herself has had to come out recently and apologise for writing literally dozens of controversial character references, including for a taxi driver who was convicted of assaulting female passengers. And Councillor Singh said in his recorded statement, all these MPs, they were quite vocal about my situation, but they were notably silent regarding their own
mm,
colleague. So,
mm.
yeah, and we do see this regularly, don't we? That double standard between what's expected of parliamentarians versus what's expected of councillors.
Yeah. All right. So Mia Shaw is back as Mayor of Wyndham. She was in the role just last year. Of course, brings to a close a fairly turbulent time because she was succeeded by Josh Gilligan, who was then removed through suspension. The office was vacated and then Preet Singh was elected. That's taking us back to February. So it's been a long time while
Yeah.
this has been bubbling away.
Yeah, and things still tied in there. I mean, 6-4 vote. She defeated Peter Maynard, Councillor Maynard. I think interesting in a symbolic move. I think Councillor Shaw on the night she was elected, 23rd of July. She explicitly chose not to don the mayoral robes and chain. And in
Mm.
her speech said, look, leadership is not something you put on, it's how you show up, the decisions you make, the standards you set, and the responsibility you take on. So
Mm.
she's a very experienced, a third-time councillor. I think this is her third time as mayor,
Yeah.
um, and perhaps a safe, experienced pair of hands there for the
Mm.
remainder of the mayoral term, which ends in early November of this year.
Would would be an interesting exercise, and I'm not going to do it because I don't have the time, but it is my observation that more and more mayors are choosing not to wear mayoral robes and jewels of office, etc., which I think is a nod to modern practicalities.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. They sort of maybe for the citizenship ceremony or something
Well,
like
yeah,
that.
that's a little different. That is more of
Mm.
a formal event, I guess, isn't it? So, leaving that one there, let's head up the highway, the Western Highway, to Ballarat, where we have a conduct decision of note. Perhaps if we just do the highlights of this one. This one relates to comments made in a live radio interview by one councillor about another, about their intention to stand for mayor, and that then led to an arbiter process.
Yeah, yeah. So I think all of us being in local government a while, we've all got a mayoral election story, Chris. And this
Mm,
one, we, as we know, what often occurs with mayoral elections is there's an informal meeting at some point, a closed council meeting where expressions of interest, who's interested in the mayoral role, and there are some informal numbers taken, so
yeah.
councillors understand what's likely to happen at the formal meeting where the mayor's elected. So the same thing occurred at the city of Ballarat in October of last year, and in fact, the CEO sent an email around in that week prior to the formal vote to say, look, these are the councillors who've nominated. That email was marked official, which is a low sensitivity label. There was that councillor only meeting. An informal indicative vote was taken. And then after the meeting, some days after the meeting, Councillor Damon Saunders went on 3BA, a station close to my heart,
Mm,
Chris, where I grew up listening to, and where he publicly disclosed not the numbers, but he said that it was down to himself and Councillor Tracy Hargraves as to who would be elected mayor. So he's disclosed who had
mm,
nominated, if you like. Councillor Hargraves subsequently complained about that. She was successfully elected at the formal meeting. The decision by Dr. Meredith Gibbs, who's given a number of these decisions, arbiter decisions, was that, look, it wasn't confidential information um, as that definition is understood under the Local Government Act. It didn't relate to personal affairs and such. However, um, there was a breach of the code because Councillor Saunders owed a duty to show courtesy and respect to Councillor Hargraves. It wasn't his role to publicly share without Councillor Hargrave's consent that she had nominated for that position. So we breached an internal policy around communications. He took away Councillor Hargrave's ability to disclose her own nomination. And that was disrespectful behaviour. So the takeaways on this one for councils, I think, and this is one for the governance managers at
mm.
councils. Firstly, there needs to be clarity and there was, of policy, and there was some criticism by the arbiter here of the Ballarat Council's policy framework here. It wasn't clear whether council only time was confidential, that email labels, what label did you need to use if you wanted something to be confidential, and that 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 while the Local Government Act has this strong presumption of transparency, there's still a duty to show care and respect. So I think council should go back and look at this one and think, do we need to clarify the status of, those closed room discussions as confidential or not? And in this case, often we see where there's a decision and a finding of misconduct, and finding misconduct here, 2-week suspension, very short suspension, but often we see an obligation for a councillor to do training. Here, no training order against Councillor Saunders. The arbiter recommends training for the entire council group on confidentiality, personal information, the use of email sensitivity labels. So I think all councils could probably benefit from that, Chris.
I think that's right, Tony. And another interesting element here that came out in the Ballarat Courier reporting of this, I'm not sure if you saw it, was about the what Councillor Hargraves called the underlying everyday sexism that was at play here. And she's called out misogyny and the language that's used. And as the Courier said in its reporting, the misconduct finding and suspension has exposed more than just an issue with confidentiality within that council.
Yeah, so the Arbiter did express some deep concerns about the sort of language used by Councillor Saunders, things like acting like a queen, childish,
Right.
vindictive, but said, I'm not going to make a finding about that because it wasn't part of the original allegation, but it is some background context and
Yeah.
and Councillor Saunders was criticised by the Arbiter for his use of language.
Yeah. Well, as always, these decisions give us just a little bit more of the picture of what's acceptable, what's not, in terms of these findings. More and more, we're seeing some of these things challenged. I think we've still got some issues in the background that are making their way through sort of appeal processes, if I recall correctly. Tony, is that
Well,
right?
we do. We have findings where councillors, or at least one councillor has indicated, I'm going to appeal this
Mm.
arbiter finding, which means
Mm.
I'm going to go off to VCAT, which would be very interesting if that occurs.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Great to catch up as always. Lots happening, and I'm sure we'll see you again in the next couple of weeks with the latest, especially as that legislation perhaps makes its way through the Victorian Parliament.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, viewers. Good to
That's
see you.
Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors here at VLGA Connect. Well, good to have back on VLGA Connect this week the Chair of Rural Councils Victoria, Councillor Rob Amos from Campaspe Shire. As part of our ongoing series as we head towards the state election this year, we wanted to talk to Rob about the issues that he believes and RCV believes should be front and centre in the conversation. Rob, welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Can I have one guess at what's at the top of your list? Is it roads?
Yeah. We have our four main pillars, and certainly roads is high on that list.
Yeah. So let's deal with roads firstly. There's been some announcements. The opposition has made some announcements about duplications in the growth areas and funding towards fixing roads across the state. What's your response to those announcements thus far?
That's good. And any announcement of an increase in roads maintenance funding, particularly, is good. So Rural Councils Victoria. So currently the state spends about $1 billion. The recent announcement about $1.06 billion or something like that spend for the next 12 months on roads, which is good. But that's normal. The $1 billion spend is just a normal part. It came out when the state announced that we're spending $1 billion. Well, that's just your normal announcement, and they'd increased it a little bit, which is what they should do each year to allow for. But at the end of the day, that $1 billion is not keeping up with our roads. Our roads are getting worse; they're not getting better.
Well, that's the point I was going to make. If that's normal clearly is no longer good enough, because anyone who's been driving outside the metropolitan areas will tell you the roads are in an atrocious state, even on the major highways.
Absolutely, they are, and so this is state government roads that we're talking about. And as you said, the opposition has come out and made an announcement of $5 billion, which in my basic calculations is about $1 billion increase over the $4 billion that would normally be in there. So that's a good increase. There's not much detail about whether that's in regional or metro or peri-urban and what that looks like. So we need to find that out. At the end of the day, Rural Councils Victoria is asking for $2 billion extra. So $500 million a year extra over the next term of governments, so the next 4 years. We think that is a very reasonable ask. Number one, as you said, our roads are going backwards. They're not even keeping up. And number two, we try and put it in a little perspective. If we think about the literally tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars that is being spent on roads in metropolitan Melbourne and public transport, we think $2 billion over 4 years is a very reasonable ask. We're not asking for new roads. We're not asking for any duplications. We are asking for the current roads to be brought back to a standard. And I think that is a very reasonable ask.
I think it is too. I think it's very fair enough, given how you've described that expenditure happening in other areas. And of course, the cost of road making materials, the cost of resourcing to fix roads is going up and up and up. So even that extra 500 million a year perhaps is not enough.
Well, and we're trying to be reasonable.
All right. Good luck with that. So that's one of your four pillars. What else is on your list of priorities this year?
Yeah, so we've got four: community wellbeing, local spaces, council sustainability and system reform, and housing and economic development is they're the four main ones. The roads one was actually a separate ask. And what we always do as Rural Councils Victoria, we don't try and be different to anyone else. So if you go and look at MAVs, the MAVs asks, they're along those lines. If you go and look at ALGA, they're along those lines. And if you go and look at the state, it's all meeting the same things.
Yeah.
And we're saying that rural councils wants to be part of the solution of achieving those goals. And so we're asking for $1 billion over 4 years to be spent in regional Victoria, with a guarantee that 25% of that will be spent in rural Victoria. I don't know if people understand. Can I just give you an idea of how rural councils works as opposed to everyone else? Yeah. So there's 79 councils in Victoria, of which is made up of metro, regional and rural. So there's 38 rural councils, of which 35 are members of Rural Councils Victoria. And probably our biggest shire is Mitchell Shire, just on the northern part of Melbourne, going up to Seymour and that area. And it's a very fast-growing big council.
Yeah, strong argument that it sort of straddles rural, regional, even some of it metropolitan, doesn't it?
Certainly. And then our smaller shire, which is not on how large the shire is, would be West Wimmera, I think, out in the west. So very, very large shire, huge road network, but very small rate base and very small budget. So, but all those councils want the same thing. They want to have good economies. They want more housing. They want really good functioning councils which are financially stable. Have really, we're currently talking about rebuilding relationships, particularly with the state. We want to be a partner with the state, and whomever is in government next year, we really want to be seen as a partner to help them achieve their objectives over the next 4 years. And community wellbeing. Our community is always screaming out for making sure we've got great infrastructure for them to be able to use, and great services that they can access as they need to.
Do you feel like you get heard on these issues from a rural perspective? Do you have the ear of the decision makers, or is that an ongoing battle?
I would suggest we don't generally have problems getting appointments to meet with people. And in fact, the pleasing thing is we are now getting departments reaching out to us when they want to do things and asking our advice. So, for example, recently we had on childcare in regional areas and rural areas reach out to us and say, we want to come and talk to you. And so we're getting that more and more. So that is a good thing. And so I think we are being listened to. We would like to see perhaps, and housing is another one. And housing is a big thing that we bat on about all the time. If you're doing housing in Ballarat or Shepparton, there's really great economic reasons for governments, state and federal, to support those, because they make a lot of economic sense. But if I go out to Western Victoria, say out to Warwick-Nabil, we're talking about doing developments that might be 10 or 20 houses, and they go, oh, what's the point of that? It actually makes a really significant difference to those communities. And further to that, if we think about what the government's objectives are, renewable energy, mining, mineral sands, that's where it's happening, is out there. And if we don't have the housing out there, how do we get the workers out there to be able to deliver some of these state priorities?
And it's not just the housing, though, isn't it? It's the other infrastructure that needs to come with it, or preferably be there before those houses are finished.
That's right, and the childcare, and other services that are not our schools, to make sure that if they need to be expanded and so on, are there to attract people.
Rob, I want to ask you about one thing that I'm not sure is on your radar, but I'm guessing it probably is: disaster recovery funding. There's been a lot said by Queensland and New South Wales councils in recent weeks, particularly about the proposed changes that have come out of the feds with the way the disaster recovery funding is managed. Do Victorian councils have an issue with those proposals?
So we're just starting the discussions of that now, but certainly we want to look at, they do need to be changed, particularly we think from a Victorian point of view. As you would know, Campaspe Shire and a lot of different councils right across the state went through some devastating floods a few years ago, and we've just seen fires that have happened recently as well. And it is still too hard to get that funding through. Campaspe Shire, I can tell you now, we are just about at the end, and we're like literally 4 years down the track. That's taking too long to recover. And we're talking about a road just recently that's been why a road would take 4 years to be redone is just beyond me. So there does need to be reform, and there does need to be discussion to make sure there's no cuts in that. This is really about how we can make it easier for councils to be able to access that funding to deliver that recovery quicker for our communities.
All right, when you've got some more sense of what that all means for you and where that might be going, we'd be happy to have another chat.
Yep.
Rob Amos, best of luck as the next few months roll out as we head towards a state election. Some of your issues are already front and centre in the debate. Let's hope we see the rest of them up there as well. And good luck to you with your advocacy objectives.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Great to be here.
Councillor Rob Amos, Chair of Rural Councils Victoria, with us today on VLGA Connect. Well, that almost brings us to the end of another edition of VLGA Connect. Before we go, a quick reminder of the VLGA's Year 2 Councillor Professional Development Program, which has been designed with councillor needs, costs and time efficiency in mind. There are flexible delivery options, including fast-paced 1-hour online modules or intensive half-day sessions that allow you to take a deeper dive into the key aspects of the councillor role. If you'd like a program designed around the specific needs of your council and delivered in a format that suits your schedule, talk to the team at the VLGA. And you can view the full Year 2 Councillor Professional Development Prospectus on the VLGA website. Thanks again to Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors of VLGA Connect. Thanks to you for listening and watching, and we look forward to having you back with us for another edition of VLGA Connect next week. Bye for now.